You can look a rattlesnake in the eye and pretend it's a garden hose all you want, but I promise you, eventually you are going to get bit. That is a fundamental truth about human nature that I have seen play out on my stage more times than I care to count. We are masters of self-deception. We have this incredible, almost terrifying ability to reshape reality to fit the narrative we need to survive the day. And when you mix that blinding need for validation with a sophisticated predator on the other end of a phone line, you end up with a disaster that destroys not just bank accounts, but entire lives. I have sat across from highly intelligent people, doctors, lawyers, educators, who have handed over their life savings to someone they have never met, all because they were sold a fairy tale that felt better than their lonely reality. But the story I want to tell you about today, the case of a woman named Sarah, was different. It wasn't just the amount of money, though, that was staggering. It was the sheer impenetrable fortress of denial she had built around a man she believed was an international tycoon. When I first reviewed the briefing for this show, I sat in my dressing room and just stared at the timeline. It was a textbook escalation of grooming and exploitation, yet the woman at the center of it was convinced she was on the verge of becoming half of a power couple. Sarah was 52 years old, a woman who had spent 30 years working as a head nurse in a trauma unit. Think about that for a second. This is a woman trained to spot symptoms, to deal with hard facts, to triage life and death situations with a clear head. She wasn't naive. She wasn't someone who floated through life with her head in the clouds, and yet there she was backstage waiting to come out and tell me and the world that the man who had drained her 401k, mortgaged her home, and alienated her only daughter was actually a misunderstood millionaire architect named Richard, who was just having some temporary liquidity issues while building a resort in the Maldives. The producers told me she was combative during the pre-interview. She wasn't coming on the show to get help. She was coming on the show to vindicate him. She wanted to prove her daughter Emily wrong. She wanted to look me in the eye and tell me that I didn't understand the complexity of international banking or the high-stakes world of architectural development. I put the file down and walked to the stage knowing that this wasn't going to be about logic. You cannot use logic to get someone out of a situation they didn't use logic to get into. This was going to be about emotion. I had to find the wound. I had to find the empty place inside Sarah that Richard was filling, because until I identified that, I was just another enemy trying to take away her happiness. When Sarah walked onto the stage, the first thing I noticed was her posture. She walked with a rigid, almost brittle confidence. She was dressed immaculately, wearing a suit that looked expensive, hair perfectly done, clutching a thick binder of printed emails and photos like it was a shield. She sat down, crossed her legs, and gave me a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was a smile that said, "I know what you think and you're wrong." I looked over at the other chair where her daughter Emily was sitting. The contrast was heartbreaking. Emily looked exhausted. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her shoulders slumped. She looked like someone who had been screaming into a void for 2 years. I started where I always start, which is trying to understand the guest's version of the truth. I asked Sarah to tell me about Richard. Her face lit up instantly. The transformation was physical. The tension left her shoulders, and her voice softened. She described a man who was sensitive, brilliant, and incredibly wealthy. She told me about how they met on a professional networking site, not a dating app, which she felt gave him more credibility. She talked about his projects, these massive, sprawling resorts that he was designing all over the world. She spoke about him not as a boyfriend, but as a partner. She used the word "we" constantly. We are dealing with some contract issues. We are waiting for the wire transfer to clear. She had completely absorbed his problems as her own. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I let her paint this picture of a glamorous, high-octane romance. She told the audience about the flowers. He sent huge bouquets of red roses. She talked about the poetry he wrote her every morning. In her mind, she wasn't a victim. She was the chosen one. She was the woman who had tamed the bachelor millionaire. But as she spoke, I was watching the audience. They were shifting in their seats. They could hear the holes in the story even if she couldn't. She mentioned that in 2 years they had never video chatted because his work on the remote islands meant the internet connection was too unstable for video, yet somehow it was stable enough for him to text her 18 hours a day. I turned to Emily and asked her what she saw when she looked at this relationship. Emily's voice trembled as she spoke. She talked about coming to her mother's house and finding the electricity turned off because Sarah had sent her utility money to Richard to pay for a customs fee on a shipment of marble. She talked about the day she found out her mother had taken a second mortgage on the house that Sarah had worked her whole life to pay off. Emily wasn't angry. She was grieving. She was grieving the loss of her mother who was sitting right there but was mentally living in a fantasy world. I miss my mom, Emily said, tears streaming down her face. I'm looking at her, but she's not here. She's gone. This man has taken everything. He's taken her money, her dignity, and now he's taking her family because I can't watch this anymore. Sarah's reaction to her daughter's pain was chilling. She didn't reach out to comfort her. She rolled her eyes. She let out a heavy sigh of exasperation, as if Emily was a petulant child who just didn't understand how the adult world worked. She doesn't understand business, Sarah told me, pointing a manicured finger at her daughter. Richard is dealing with millions of dollars. When you move that kind of money around, there are fees, there are taxes. It's complicated. Emily just sees the short term. I'm looking at our future. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. This was the pivot point. I needed to establish the scale of the destruction before we could even begin to talk about the man causing it. I asked Sarah directly, how much money have you sent him, Sarah? And I want the real number. Not the number you tell your daughter, the number that keeps you awake at 3 a.m. She hesitated. For a split second, the facade cracked and I saw the fear behind her eyes, but she clamped it down. It's an investment, she said defensively. I've loaned him approximately $250,000. But he has a check waiting for me for $5 million once the freeze on his accounts is lifted. The audience gasped. $250,000. That was her retirement. That was her safety net, gone. And she was clinging to a promise of $5 million like a life raft in the middle of the ocean. Sarah, I said, keeping my voice low and steady, I want to be very clear about who I am and why I am here. I don't have a dog in this hunt. I don't care if Richard is the King of England or a guy sitting in an internet cafe in Lagos. My only interest is you. But you have to understand something. You are telling me that a man who has $5 million for you cannot pay his own cell phone bill. You are telling me that an international architect needs a nurse from Ohio to pay for his plane tickets. Does that track for you? Does that make sense to the woman who runs a trauma unit? She stiffened. You don't know him, she said. You're judging him based on typical standards. His assets are frozen because of a political situation in the region he's building in. It's temporary. She was regurgitating the script. I've heard it 1,000 times. The frozen assets, the political unrest, the temporary liquidity issue, it is the scammer's greatest hit. But what struck me was how fiercely she defended it. She wasn't just defending Richard, she was defending her own intelligence. To admit he was a fraud was to admit she had been a fool and her ego wouldn't allow that. I knew then that simply showing her proof wasn't going to work. If I pulled out bank records right now, she'd have an excuse. If I showed her IP addresses, she'd have a technical explanation. Richard had fed her. I had to go deeper. I had to understand how this started. I had to take the audience and Sarah back to the beginning, before the money, before the lies, to find out what was happening in her life the day she clicked on that profile. Because people don't fall for these scams because they are stupid. They fall for them because they are hungry. And Sarah was starving I looked at Sarah and asked her to take me back to the year before she met Richard. It is a question that catches people off guard because they are so focused on defending the present that they forget I am interested in the architecture of their past. We needed to understand the soil in which this weed had taken root. Sarah shifted in her chair, smoothing her skirt, and for the first time, her defiance softened into something that looked a lot like exhaustion. She told me about her life. She had been divorced for 15 years. Her ex-husband had left her for a younger woman, a cliche that stings no matter how common it is. For 15 years, she had been the rock. She raised Emily alone. She rose to the top of her nursing field. She was the person everyone called in a crisis. If a pipe burst, Sarah fixed it. If a family member got sick, Sarah managed the care. She was competent, reliable, and utterly, profoundly invisible. She told me that she felt like a utility, not a person. She was a function. Sarah the nurse, Sarah the mother, Sarah the problem solver. But nobody asked Sarah how she was doing. Nobody took care of Sarah. And then late one night after a 12-hour shift in the ER where she had held the hand of a dying patient, she went home to an empty house, poured a glass of wine, and opened her laptop. That's when Richard appeared. And here is the key, the thing that everyone missing the point fails to understand. Richard didn't ask her for money. Not at first. He didn't talk about architecture or millions of dollars. He asked her, "How was your day? You look like you carry the weight of the world on your shoulders." It was a masterstroke. He reached right through the screen and touched the exact spot where she hurt the most. He offered her a place where she didn't have to be strong. He told her he wanted to take care of her. He told her she was a queen who deserved to be spoiled. For 6 months, they just talked. He groomed her. That is a harsh word, but it is the correct one. He groomed her to trust him implicitly. He built a virtual reality where the two of them were soulmates separated by circumstance. He mirrored her values back to her. She told him she loved Italian opera. Suddenly, he was listening to Puccini while looking at blueprints. She told him she dreamed of retiring to the coast. Suddenly, he was designing a beach house just for her. He wasn't a person, he was a reflection of her deepest desires. I turned to the audience and explain this dynamic because it is crucial. We all want to be heard. We all want to be validated. And when someone comes along and holds up a mirror that shows us the best version of ourselves, it is intoxicating. It is a drug. And Sarah was addicted to the way Richard made her feel about herself. She felt desirable again. She felt important. She felt seen. The money, when it finally came up, was just the cover charge for keeping that feeling alive. The escalation began slowly, as it always does. The boiling frog effect. If he had asked for $50,000 on day one, she would have blocked him. But he didn't. He asked for $500 to replace a specialized hard drive that had crashed containing all his designs. It was an emergency. He was panicked. He played on her nurturing instinct, the nurse in her who fixes problems. She sent the money. He paid her back a week later with interest, sending her $600. This is a classic con artist move. It establishes credit. It proves he is trustworthy. It lowers the defenses. Then came the bigger ask. The project in Malaysia hit a snag. The local government needed a permit fee. His accounts were flagged for suspicious activity because of the large transfers, a lie that sounds plausible if you don't know banking, but terrifying if you're in love. Sarah sent $10,000, then $20,000, then she liquidated her savings. I turned to Emily, who was gripping the armrest of her chair so hard her knuckles were white. I asked her when she realized this was spiraling out of control. Emily described a Thanksgiving dinner that never happened. Sarah was supposed to host. Emily arrived with her husband and their toddler, only to find Sarah in her bedroom, frantic, surrounded by Western Union receipts. Richard was supposedly in a Turkish prison over a misunderstanding with a contractor. He needed $50,000 for bail or he would be beaten. She looked at me, Emily said, her voice breaking, and she asked me to co-sign a loan on Thanksgiving. She was crying, shaking, saying that if I didn't help, his blood would be on my hands. I told her no. I told her it was a lie. And she screamed at me. She told me I was jealous. She told me I wanted her to be alone and miserable. That was the turning point in the escalation, the isolation phase. The scammer knows that family and friends are the enemy. They are the reality check. So Richard began to poison Sarah against Emily. He told Sarah that Emily was controlling, that she didn't want her mother to find happiness, that Emily was small-minded and couldn't comprehend the scale of their love. He created an us against the world narrative. And Sarah, desperate to protect the fantasy, cut her daughter off. She stopped answering calls. She changed the locks. She retreated further into the bunker she had built with Richard, where the only window to the outside world was her phone screen. I looked at Sarah. She was shaking her head during Emily's testimony, muttering under her breath. "That's not how it happened," she said. "He was in danger, real danger. You don't understand the corruption in that part of the world. I saved his life." "Sarah," I said, cutting through her defense, "you are a smart woman. You know how triage works. You assess the vital signs. Let's look at the vital signs of this relationship. You have never seen his face in real time. You have never met his friends. You have never seen his office. Every single crisis he has had, every arrest, every hospital stay, every frozen account could only be solved by your money. Not his lawyers, not his business partners, you. Does that sound like a relationship to you, or does that sound like a payroll?" She glared at me. "He pays me back with love," she said. "He listens to me. He cares about me. He cares about your credit limit," I shot back. "And I'm going to prove it to you. Because while you were busy keeping him out of imaginary prisons, my team was busy finding out who this person really is. And I have to tell you, Sarah, the man you are in love with doesn't exist. He is a ghost. But the person who has been cashing your checks, he is very real, and he is laughing at you." The air left the room. Sarah's defiance wavered for just a second. This is the moment I look for, the crack in the armor. She wasn't ready to believe me yet, but she was scared. She knew deep down in the quiet places she tried to drown out with Richard's texts that something was wrong, but the cost of being wrong was too high. If she was wrong, she wasn't just broke, she was a fool who had thrown away her family for a phantom. My job was to make the pain of staying in the lie greater than the pain of facing the truth. I picked up the blue folder on the table next to me. It wasn't thick, but it was heavy with evidence. "We tracked the IP addresses, Sarah," I said, my voice dropping to a serious, almost conspiratorial tone. "We followed the money. You think you're sending money to Malaysia? You think you're wiring funds to a Turkish consulate? I'm going to show you exactly where your money went. And I'm going to show you the picture of the man who is really sitting on the other end of that phone." I signaled to the producers. The giant screen behind us flickered. Sarah flinched, physically recoiling as if she expected a blow. This was the confrontation phase, but we weren't just confronting her with facts. We were confronting her with the reality of her own victimization. I needed her to see the mechanism. I needed her to see the strings so she could stop dancing. "Sarah, look at the screen," I commanded. She hesitated, her eyes darting between me and the floor. "Look at the screen, Sarah. You owe yourself that much. You've paid $250,000 for this ticket. You might as well watch the show." She slowly lifted her head. On the screen was a photo she knew well. It was the photo Richard used on his profile, a handsome, silver-haired man in a hard hat pointing at a skyscraper. "A distinguished, successful architect. This is the man you love, correct?" I asked. "Yes," she whispered. "No," I said firmly. "This is a man named David. He is a real estate agent in Arizona. He has been married for 20 years. He has never been to Malaysia. We spoke to him yesterday. He has no idea who you are." Sarah stared at the screen. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the image of the man she thought she knew. But even then, even with the undeniable truth staring her in the face, the denial kicked in. It was visceral. She shook her head, small, jerky movements. No, she said, her voice trembling but stubborn. That's people steal photos all the time. Richard told me about this. He said there are imposters out there trying to ruin his reputation. That man in Arizona is the fake. Richard is the real one. He warned me you might try this. I had to hand it to the scammer. He had inoculated her against the truth. He had anticipated every move we would make and planted a preemptive lie to neutralize it. That is psychological warfare. He had turned me into the villain before I even walked into the room. Okay, I said, leaning back. Let's assume for a second that you are right. Let's play in your sandbox. Let's say the man in Arizona is a liar and your Richard is the real deal. Then explain this. I signaled the screen again. A new image appeared. It was a map of the world with red lines connecting different points. These are the locations where your money was picked up, Sarah. You wired funds to an account supposedly in London for his lawyers, right? And another to Dubai for permits. Look at the map. Every single withdrawal, every single one happened within a 3-mile radius in Lagos, Nigeria. The audience murmured. Sarah blinked. She was trying to process the geography, trying to make the square peg of Nigeria fit into the round hole of her international architect story. He has teams, she stammered. He has subcontractors all over the world. They handle the logistics. Sarah, I said, my voice rising just a notch, bringing the intensity. Stop. Just stop. You are smarter than this. You are a head nurse. You deal with facts. If a patient's blood pressure is 60/40, you don't say, maybe they are just resting. You say, they are crashing. Your relationship is crashing. You are sending money to Nigeria. You are texting a number that is routed through a VoIP service used by scammers. And the man in the photo is a realtor in Scottsdale. I paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the air. But I have one more thing to show you, because I knew you would have an answer for the photos. I knew you would have an excuse for the bank transfers. But you told my producer something very specific. You said you have a special voice message he sent you, a voice message where he sings to you for your birthday. You said it was the most beautiful personal thing anyone has ever done for you. She nodded, tears welling up. Yes, he has a beautiful voice. He sang Unchained Melody to me. We have that recording, I said, and we ran it through a digital forensic analysis. But we didn't just analyze the voice. We found the source. I turned to the screen again. A video started playing. It wasn't a grainy hidden camera video. It was a YouTube clip. A young man, maybe 20 years old, sitting in a bedroom with posters on the wall, singing Unchained Melody into a microphone. The audio was identical. It was the exact same recording. The breath intakes, the pitch, the slight crack on the high note. It was a cover song uploaded 3 years ago by an aspiring singer in the Philippines. Sarah froze. Her hand went to her mouth. She made a sound that wasn't quite a sob, but a sharp intake of breath like she had been punched in the gut. This was the one thing she couldn't explain away. The photo could be stolen. The bank accounts could be complicated, but the voice that was intimate, that was the voice that whispered to her at night. That was the voice she fell asleep to. And seeing it coming out of the mouth of a stranger on YouTube shattered the illusion in a way no bank statement ever could. He didn't sing to you, Sarah, I said softly. He downloaded a file. He pressed send. It took him 5 seconds. And it cost you everything. She crumbled. The rigid posture collapsed. She put her head in her hands and began to weep. It wasn't the polite crying of someone trying to save face. It was the guttural, ugly crying of a woman watching her world disintegrate. Emily stood up and rushed over to her mother, wrapping her arms around her. Sarah didn't push her away this time. She leaned into her daughter, burying her face in Emily's shoulder. I'm so stupid, Sarah sobbed. I'm so stupid. How could I be so stupid? This is the most dangerous moment. Shame is a toxic emotion. Guilt can be productive. It tells you you made a mistake. Shame tells you that you are a mistake. And if Sarah stayed in that shame, she would never recover. She would retreat from the world and die a little inside every day. Listen to me, I said, leaning forward, my voice commanding the room. Look at me, Sarah. She looked up, her face streaked with mascara. You are not stupid. You are lonely, and you are targeted by professionals. These people wake up every morning, brush their teeth, sit down at a computer, and go to work. Their job is to steal your heart so they can steal your wallet. They have scripts. They have psychological playbooks. They are predators. If you were walking down the street and someone hit you over the head with a baseball bat and took your purse, would you call yourself stupid? No, you would call yourself a victim of a crime. This is no different. He just used a different weapon. He used your need for love against you. I let that sink in. I wanted to reframe the narrative. She wasn't a fool, she was a casualty. But here is the hard truth. I continued. The money is gone. I need you to hear me. It is gone. You are never going to see a dime of that $250,000 again. The police can't get it back. The FBI can't get it back. It is in the wind. She nodded, wiping her eyes. The hope was gone from her face, replaced by a stark, cold reality. So the question now, I said, is not how do we get the money back? The question is how do we get Sarah back? Because you have lost more than money. You have lost your trust in yourself. You have damaged your relationship with your daughter. You have lost years of your life to a phantom. Are you willing to stop digging? Are you willing to put down the shovel and say, I am done? I'm done, she whispered. I can't do this anymore. Good, I said, because that is the first step. But words are easy. Action is hard. You have a phone in your pocket. I want you to take it out. She hesitated, her hand trembling as she reached into her pocket and pulled out the smartphone. It was the lifeline to Richard. It was the addiction. I want you to give that phone to me, I said. Right now, we are going to erase it. We are going to change your number. We are going to cut the cord. Because as long as that door is cracked open even an inch, he will find a way back in. He will tell you, I forced you to say this. He will tell you the video was a fake created by my producers. He will spin a new lie. And because you are hurting, part of you will want to believe him. The only way to win is to stop playing. Sarah looked at the phone. She looked at the screensaver, which I assume was a picture of Richard. She looked at Emily. And then with a shaking hand, she reached out and handed the phone to me. Take it, she said. I took the phone and handed it to a producer. You did the right thing, I told her, but we are not done. You are going home to a house with a second mortgage and an empty bank account. You are going to wake up tomorrow morning and the silence is going to be deafening. The good morning beautiful text aren't going to be there. And you are going to feel a withdrawal like you are coming off heroin. You need help, real help. I wasn't about to send Sarah back into the wilderness without a compass. We had stripped away the fantasy, but if we didn't replace it with something substantial, she would just build another one or worse, collapse entirely. I looked at her then at Emily. They were holding hands now, a small bridge rebuilt over a chasm of betrayal. Sarah, I said, I have arranged for you to work with a team of forensic accountants not to get your money back because, as I said, that ship has sailed, but to help you structure the debt so you don't lose your home. We are going to stop the bleeding. But more importantly, I want you to talk to someone. I'm setting you up with a therapist in your area who specializes in trauma and relationship fraud. Because what you have been through is a trauma, it is an emotional rape. You need to process that or it will haunt you forever. She nodded, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. She looked smaller than she had when she walked out, but she also looked real. The brittle shell was gone. And Emily, I turned to the daughter. You have a job to do too. You cannot say, I told you so. Not once, not ever. If you do, you push her right back into the shame spiral. Your job is to just be there to help her fill the silence. Can you do that? Yes, Emily said, her voice firm. I just want my mom back. You have her, I said. She's right here. She's a little bruised, a little battered, but she's here. I wrapped up the segment looking into the camera to deliver the final thought to the millions watching at home. We all want to believe in fairy tales, I said, but real love doesn't ask you to empty your bank account. Real love doesn't hide in the shadows. If it seems too good to be true, it is. Don't let your loneliness write checks your reality can't cash. We cut to commercial, but the story didn't end when the red light went off. Backstage, the mood was somber. Sarah was sitting in the green room staring at the wall. The adrenaline of the confrontation had worn off, and the crushing weight of her financial ruin was settling in. I walked in not as the TV host, but as a counselor. It's going to be a hard road, Sarah, I told her sitting opposite her. I'm not going to lie to you. You are going to be angry. You are going to be embarrassed. You're going to wake up some nights and reach for the phone to tell Richard about your day and then remember he doesn't exist. That grief is real. You have to mourn him. Even though he was a lie, your feelings were real. Mourn the relationship, bury it, and move on. She looked up at me, her eyes red and puffy. I feel so empty, she whispered. He was my whole life for 2 years. What do I do now? You rebuild, I said, brick by brick. You go back to work. You focus on your patients. You play with your grandchild. You rediscover who Sarah was before Richard. She was a pretty impressive woman. I'd like to meet her again. 6 months later, we did a follow-up. Usually these stories go one of two ways. Either the person relapses, finds a new scammer, and disappears down the rabbit hole again because the reality is too painful to bear, or they wake up. Sarah woke up. She appeared on the show via satellite from her home. She looked different. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by a simple sweater. She looked tired, yes. She was working extra shifts at the hospital to pay down the debt. She had sold her car and was driving a used sedan. The luxury was gone, but her eyes were clear. Dr. Phil, she said, a genuine smile touching her lips. It's been the hardest 6 months of my life. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I declared bankruptcy last month. I lost the house I raised Emily in. I'm living in a small apartment now. The audience was silent. It wasn't the happy ending they wanted. They wanted to hear she won the lottery or the FBI caught the guy. But this was the real ending. But she continued, I had dinner with Emily and my grandson last night. We made spaghetti. We laughed. I haven't laughed in 2 years. I was so stressed, so anxious, waiting for Richard's next crisis that I forgot how to breathe. I'm poor Dr. Phil. I'm starting over at 53. But I'm free. I'm not looking at my phone every 2 minutes. I'm not lying to the people I love. I own my life again, and that is worth more than the money I lost. I smiled back at her. Sarah, that is what success looks like. It's not about the money. Money is renewable. Time is not. You stop throwing good time after bad. You save the rest of your life. We also showed an update on the investigation. The information we gathered, the IP addresses, the bank accounts in Lagos, was turned over to federal authorities. Will they ever catch Richard? Probably not. He is likely a composite of 5 different people working in a boiler room in Nigeria, moving on to the next Sarah before our episode even aired. That is the frustrating reality of cybercrime. The justice isn't in the arrest. The justice is in the victim escaping the trap. I thought about Sarah long after the cameras stopped rolling on that follow-up. Her story stuck with me because it highlighted a universal vulnerability. We tend to think of scam victims as greedy or senile. Sarah was neither. She was just human. She had a hole in her heart and she tried to fill it. The tragedy wasn't that she fell for a lie. The tragedy was that the lie was the only thing that made her feel alive for a while. As I walked out of the studio that evening, passing the rows of empty seats, I thought about the thousands of other Sarahs out there sitting in the dark, the blue light of a phone screen illuminating their faces, reading a text from a soulmate they will never meet. They are one click away from ruin. And all I can do, all any of us can do, is keep turning on the lights, keep showing the truth, and hope that when they look in the mirror, they see their own worth instead of needing a stranger to invent it for them. You can't save everyone, but you can give them the tools to save themselves. Sarah picked up the tools. She did the work. She paid the price, a steep one, but she bought her freedom back. And in my book, that makes her a hero in her own story. She faced the rattlesnake, she got bit, but she survived the venom. And now she knows exactly what a garden hose looks like, and she knows exactly what a snake looks like. She won't be making that mistake again. There is a quiet dignity in facing the wreckage of your own life and choosing to pick up a broom instead of a bottle or a fantasy. Sarah didn't get the Hollywood ending. She didn't get her money back, she didn't get the years back, and she certainly didn't get the prince. But what she got was something far more durable. She got the truth. And the truth, as bitter as it tastes going down, is the only medicine that actually cures the disease. I remember walking Sarah out to her car after that first taping. It's something I don't always do, but I felt a pull to make sure she was steady. The bright lights were off, the audience was gone. It was just a parking lot in Hollywood, gray and concrete. She stopped at the door of the car service we had arranged, turned to me, and asked a question that cut right through the noise. "Dr. Phil," she said, her hand resting on the door handle, "do you think he ever cared, even a little? Was any part of it real?" It's the question every victim asks. They want to salvage just one scrap of humanity from the betrayal. They want to believe that for 1 second, in the midst of the lies, there was a genuine connection. I looked her in the eye. I didn't want to hurt her, but I couldn't lie to her. "Sarah," I said gently, "the person you were talking to was a script. But the feelings you felt, the love you gave, that was real. That came from you. He didn't give you that capacity to love. You had it all along. He just gave you a target for it. Now you just need to aim it at people who actually deserve it. Aim it at Emily. Aim it at your grandson. Aim it at yourself." She nodded slowly, absorbing it. It wasn't the answer she wanted, but it was the answer she needed. She got into the car, and as it drove away, I saw her pick up her phone, not the old one, but a temporary one we had given her. She didn't text, she dialed, and I knew she was calling her daughter. That is the takeaway here. We live in a world that is increasingly disconnected despite being more connected than ever. We are starving for intimacy, and that hunger makes us blind. We ignore the red flags, the broken cameras, the foreign bank accounts, the inconsistencies, because the alternative is to admit that we are alone. But solitude is better than exploitation. Being alone is better than being with a phantom who is picking your pockets. Sarah's journey from the head nurse who commanded a trauma unit to a victim of a romance scam and finally to a woman rebuilding her life in a small apartment is a cautionary tale. But it is also a story of resilience. It proves that you can lose everything material and still keep the things that matter, provided you are willing to face the music. The scammer, whoever he is, wherever he is still out there. He's probably typing "Good morning, my queen" to someone else right now. But he didn't win this one. He took Sarah's money, yes, but he didn't take her spirit. He tried to turn her against her family, and in the end, he only made that bond stronger. He tried to break her, and instead, he forced her to find a strength she didn't know she had. So the next time your phone buzzes with a friend request from a handsome stranger who seems too good to be true, remember Sarah. Remember the $250,000. Remember the frozen assets and the broken camera. And remember that the only people who truly love you are the ones who show up when the power is out, not the ones who ask you to pay the bill. Life is not a dress rehearsal. You don't get a refund on wasted time. Protect your heart, protect your wallet, and keep your eyes wide open. Because the garden hose is just a hose, but the snake is always waiting for you to blink.